Morning, guys. If we accept the idea that we are the programmers and that we can write the program, the final part of it is to live and run the program. Run the program, the new program of your mind, the current program that you are creating, the one where you know that you can be better than you were yesterday or than you were a second ago. And it is a process. It is a tough battle. But if you commit to it and if you live it and run the program that you write down and create for yourself, you are going to see incredible changes. And I want you to know that you're going to get challenged each and every moment. There are going to be voices in your head that are telling you, you can't do this, that you can't continue on, you're going to lose. You have to stand up and fight those voices every single day by living that new program. And eventually, it will become natural. Have a great day, everyone.
I have been making espresso videos for 7 years now, and I thought it would be fun to look back on the first 7 espressos that I've made over the next 7 days so you can enjoy, maybe have a few laughs, and hopefully also get inspired. Here we go. So today, let's look at the 7th espresso I ever made on Tim Ferriss. Good morning, Believe Nation. If your business isn't taking off yet and it's starting to have an impact on your confidence as a human being and it's impacting your self-worth, then I'm going to share with you an inspiring clip from Tim Ferriss that I think will help. So I can totally relate to this. I remember in my first business, my business was everything. I put everything I had into it. And when I wasn't getting results, it took a major toll on myself, on my self-worth, on my confidence. And I remember prior to that, anything I had applied myself to, if I put work into it and effort, I would see results. And here I was putting everything I had into this business and I wasn't seeing results. And I started to feel worthless and useless. And then it was hard to get up and put energy into my business. And so now, while I spend a lot of time on my business, I also have other interests. I'll go salsa dancing and DJing, I'll go snowboarding, I'll go camping, I'll play League of Legends. And what I've come to understand is, even if I've had a terrible week for whatever reason, terrible day, terrible month in my business, I can turn it around by seeing growth and learning in those other areas of my life. So if I'm going salsa dancing, I might learn a new move. If I'm DJing, I might put on a new song. If I'm playing League of Legends, I might be trying out a new champion or new strategies. If I'm going camping, I might be trying out how to improve my upside down fire. If I'm going snowboarding, I might figure out how do I learn new tricks and jumps. There's always something new that I can learn and improve on. And when I make those goals, when I see learning and progress, that gives me fuel and energy that I can take back to my business because I may not have seen growth and energy there. So for those of you watching, I'd love to know what other passions and interests and hobbies you have that when things aren't going really that well in your business, you're able to do those things and that gives you the energy and life force back that you can go and pour that back into your company. So leave a comment below, let me know what those activities are. I'm really curious to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Continue to believe. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you tomorrow morning for another shot of espresso. If you want another amazing Tim Ferriss video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
When I'm procrastinating because there is indecision, and this is a particular breed of procrastination. In other words, if I have 10 things on my to-do list or 10 potential projects I could pursue,
Good morning, guys. I want to share with you a story from Les Brown again today in order to laugh. in terms of our being on our path to infinite mind wealth. And just to know and be aware that either it might be you or it might be people around you, it might be our children. There are times when we look at them and, there may be times for yourself where you may be getting into trouble, making mistakes, this and that. Well, I remember Les Brown sharing a story where his mom was referring to his childhood and saying, when Les finally achieved his dreams and he was able to buy a home for his mom, she said to him, I could never have imagined this happening. You were always getting into things when you were young, Les Brown. You were always getting into trouble. I could never have imagined this. So it just reminds me that we're always going to be on our path to making mistakes. And some of those people around us that we think they're always getting into trouble, we're all trying to figure it out. They're all on their path. So I just thought it was so funny. Never underestimate ourselves. Have a great day, everyone.
It's a good thing I waited 33 years to bench press, because otherwise I might have done it wrong.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and like Andrew Huberman says,
for any of us, success in any endeavor is very closely related to how much focus we can bring to that endeavor.
so let's help you bring more focus to your endeavor with Andrew Huberman and my take on his top 10 rules of success.
I'm going to go now. So thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1, focus.
For any of us, success in any endeavor is very closely related to how much focus we can bring to that endeavor. And the reward system, you start to realize, is entirely internal. No one's coming along and cramming dopamine in your ear or dripping it in your brain. It's all internal. And this starts to bring us into the kind of like discussion around mindsets. Because so my colleague Carol Dweck, who popularized this theme, growth mindset, it's, again, a very misunderstood concept. It's the idea that we can change, so that's built into that. But the discovery of growth mindset was of these kids that actually really enjoyed doing problem sets that they knew they couldn't get right. But for them, they would get this like dopamine release from just focusing on the problem. They liked doing puzzles they couldn't get right. It sounds crazy, but inevitably those kids are very good at puzzles and very good at math and these kinds of things. So growth mindset is, I believe, if it's sort of a neuroscience lens on growth mindset, would be that the agitation and stress that you feel at the beginning of something and when you're trying to lean into it and you can't focus is just a recognized gate. You have to pass through that gate to get to the focus component. And then if you can reward the effort process, you really start to feel joy and low levels of excitement in the effort process. That's that buffering of adrenaline. That's that feeling like, yes, I've got a lot of adrenaline in my system, but I'm on the right path. It feels good to walk up this hill, so to speak. And when you start to bring those neural circuits together, you really start to create a whole set of circuits that are designed to be exported to any behavior you want. So if it's writing a book, great. If it's podcasting, great. If it's building a business, great. If it's building a terrific relationship, great. Then the circuits that Mother Nature has designed are incredibly generic so that we could adapt to whatever it is that we need to do. And I think the misunderstanding around how these circuits work has led to this idea that there's some secret entry point, maybe marked flow on the door, and there's a trampoline up to that door, and you just open that door and you're gonna be in it.
Right.
And nothing could be further from the truth. And anyone who's done well in any career or athletic pursuit knows this, but unfortunately, there's a kind of obsession with the idea that it's all supposed to feel good. And it does feel good, but there's a whole staircase in which it feels kind of lousy.
Rule number 2, replace negative thoughts.
I'm never going to argue that we can subjectively control all of our experience, because there's some things that just genuinely suck, right? And it's important to register those not so great events or terrible events, because they can drive us also. We can be driven from a place of anger, frustration, and revenge, or we can be driven from a place of love, gratitude, and et cetera. I'm not here to judge which one is better or worse, but the nervous system doesn't distinguish between them. So if you're the kind of person that needs to kind of budge yourself into something, great. If you're the kind of person that wants to do things from more of a warm, fuzzy feeling, that's fine too. What I will say is this: the ability to tap into this dopamine reward system, which is activated anytime you're in pursuit of something that's outside the boundaries of your skin and literally the boundaries of your body, as well as the reward system, the serotonin oxytocin system, which is really about the things that are contained within your own body and immediate experience, things like gratitude and, touch and comfort and things like that with loved ones. The ability to tap into both is crucial. Now, you said something really important, which was, well, negative thoughts. What to do? I don't believe that it's very easy to suppress negative thoughts. However, when you realize that thoughts can be deliberately introduced, you can start replacing negative thoughts with new types of thoughts. So you can always add something in. But when people start to realize that thoughts are very much like physical actions of reaching and picking up a glass of water, or taking a jog around the block, or typing an email perfectly. This is something I sometimes do because I struggle to do the perfect email. Not all my emails are perfect, but when I do one, I make sure that I complete it and I think, okay, it's possible. It's not because the email being perfect is so important. It's because I want to remind myself that my thoughts and my actions are essentially the same. The nervous system can organize thoughts. So for somebody that's struggling, we have these examples like, oh, they were really back on their heels, or they were so depleted, no money and all this stuff. What are they going to, we have so many examples like that, but in trying to make it actionable, it's really about saying, yep, that's all true. But I'm going to introduce a thought, which is, I made it through today. I made it through today, and that's actually worth celebrating at a micro level. So if you can give yourself dopamine rewards in small increments, right? You're not trying to celebrate that you made it through one day. Sometimes that's a huge feat, but most of the time, you just want to dose yourself with a little bit of that internal release of dopamine. You start rewarding incremental steps. And if there's anything that your listeners could take away from this whole thing about dopamine and reward schedules and being in movement, it's reward incremental steps, in particular, incremental steps that are about forward action. So maybe that's writing an email. Maybe that's that run around the block. Maybe that's something much grander for you. As you get better at things, right, the stairs get further and further away from one another because you've achieved more success. And so they tend to be, you have to take the rungs on the ladder further apart, so to speak. That's a time when you really need to implement not only the dopamine rewards, but also those serotonin and oxytocin rewards, et cetera. So to make it actionable, I would say, remember, don't spend so much time trying to suppress negative thoughts. If you need trauma therapy, pursue that with a professional. But if you have negative thoughts, just remember, I can also introduce positive thoughts. The same way I can control running around the block. Positive thoughts are the equivalent of forward physical action. And if you reward them internally, you buffer yourself against the quitting circuit, this norepinephrine circuit we were talking about before. You are building a stronger version of yourself completely between your own ears. And some people say, well, that's silly. It's like you're saying, oh, I'm going to jump up and down, reward myself for doing nothing. No, you're building the neural circuits that you can control self-reward. And in doing that, you can push through days and weeks of effort consistently. I don't mean necessarily all-nighters, but you can push and push and push.
Rule number 3, reward the progress.
Growth mindset, which is the academic discovery and laboratory discovery of my colleague Carol Dweck at Stanford, is the hallmark of growth mindset is really two things. One is I'm not where I want to be now, but I'm capable of getting there eventually. The other is to attach a sense of reward to the effort process itself. In fact,
don't reward the result, reward the effort.
That's right. And if you look at true high performers, people that are consistently good at what they do, they don't peak and go through the postpartum depression and crash and come back, and their life is a cycle of ups and downs, but really people who are on that upward trajectory consistently, those people attach dopamine to the effort process. And actually, one of her original studies on the discovery of growth mindset was these kids that loved doing math problems that they knew they couldn't get right. So it's like the people who love puzzles, but in this case, they knew they couldn't get it right, but they loved doing it. And incidentally or not so incidentally, these kids are fantastic at math when there is a right answer, because they feel some sense of reward from the effort process.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing about dopamine is that it's very subjectively controlled. We can all learn to secrete dopamine in our brain in response to things that are in a purely subjective way.
Our interpretation.
But it has to be attached to reality. So, one should never confuse
What is real?
Right. So if you're thinking about the effort you're expending, so let's say somebody right now is financially back on their heels and they're setting up a new business, for instance, and it's hard. If they can take a few moments or minutes each day to reflect on the fact that the effort process is allowing them to climb out of their hole potentially, that it's giving them an opportunity, that it's somehow they are on the right path, or if they're not in movement along that path, or at least oriented on the right path, they're not lying in bed all day.
They're taking a step
They're taking
forward.
a step. If they can reward that process internally, two things happen. First of all, the brain circuits that are associated with building subjective rewards and dopamine get stronger, so you get better at that process. And second, and most importantly, dopamine has an amazing ability to buffer adrenaline and buffer epinephrine. And what I mean by that is there was a study that was published in the journal Cell, excellent journal, Cell Press Journal, a couple years ago, showing that with repeated bouts of effort, we use and we release more and more epinephrine. It's kind of adrenaline, but in the brain.
With more effort, we
Every
release
time,
this.
every time you put in effort. So every time you make, for this, let's keep it, if I were to keep it in the business context, every time you write that email, every time you, let's say it's a person who's a craftsman or a craftswoman, every time you're working in the shop and doing that, every bit of effort, you're taking a little bit of money out of this epinephrine account. You're spending epinephrine. Now, at some point, those levels of epinephrine get high enough that you feel like quitting. It feels exhausting. And this was done in a beautiful study, actually, where they control the visual environments and they have the subjects exert effort. And they can control the visual environment. So sometimes the effort of taking steps and moving forward, this is actually kind of pushing forward in kind of swimming motion, would give them the sensation that they were actually making progress. And other times it was an exercise in futility where they would just keep the visual world stationary and they would expend effort and they didn't think they were going anywhere.
My gosh.
Epinephrine's climbing, and eventually they quit. Now dopamine is able to push back on that epinephrine and give you anyone the feeling that you could continue, and maybe even the feeling that you want to continue. And you've seen this actually, like football is a good example. Two teams play, say the Super Bowl. Both teams are max effort the entire time.
Yeah.
Max effort. The team that wins suddenly, in a moment, has the energy to jump all over the place, party for days. They can talk. I mean, they have
exhausted
energy.
right before
That's right.
then.
Well, that wasn't glycogen or stored energy of any kind, except it was neural energy. And what happened was effort is this adrenaline. Eventually, people quit. They just quit. The dopamine is able to suppress that. And so then you're expending effort, but you're doing it from a place of feeling like you have energy for it.
Rule number 4, detach from external rewards.
There was a paper published that essentially was asking why any human or animal quits at any behavior. Now, certain behaviors, like I can't lift a car, unless it's a very small car. I can't lift a car. But if we're talking about running, or we're talking about long bouts of work, the question is, why do we quit? Like, what is that? And it turns out that every time we exert effort, a certain amount of noradrenaline in the brain is released. And there's a sort of a counter in the brainstem. And at some point, enough noradrenaline is released and it shuts down cognitive control, deliberate control over the motor circuitry, and we quit. That's it. But the thing that can restore those levels, or can sort of reset those levels lower and give us more gas, more mileage, is dopamine. And it makes perfect sense because our species had to move against very challenging things in nature and in terms of in culture at every stage of our evolution, including now. 2020 is a good example of this. And when a good example would be if you're really slogging it out and things are miserable, just think like the worst family vacation, everything's a disaster, or a very hard physical event, and someone cracks a joke, you almost immediately feel a sense of relief. You see this in the team that wins the Super Bowl. Both teams slogged it out. You have to believe they were both at max effort the entire game. Look at the team that wins. They have extra energy. They're jumping all over the place. So it can't be physical energy. It can't be glycogen related. It's not ketone related. It's nothing in the body in that sense. It's dopamine's ability to take that level of norepinephrine and smack it back down. And so we can learn this, right? I mean, I think this is where there's real power. Like in your story, or the story that I'm familiar with, from your book, like the ability to push through those pain points is something that we really can export to other aspects of life, because it's the same neurochemicals that are involved. So when you get to a particular location, or maybe I recall, a portion where you're feeling lousy, you're injured or you feel like you're hurt, and you can reframe it mentally and think, I'm actually still on the ladder. I'm still holding on to a rung. I know at least that much. I'm still breathing. I know that much. And the lift that we get is not some psychological pump up. It's a neurochemical thing. It's dopamine suppressing norepinephrine and saying, you're on the right path. You can keep going. It's a permission to keep going. And we grant that permission to ourselves. No one grants that permission to us. I think one of the other kind of misconceptions that we want to dissolve is this idea that external rewards can actually propel us down long paths of success and high performance. They can't.
No, that's
internal
a sustainable
rewards.
Fuel source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend from the SEAL teams, and somebody asked us recently, we were given a talk, and somebody said, how can I make sure that I continue to self-reward and I'm not driven by these external rewards? How can I continue to have that drive? And his answer was very good. He said, give away all the external rewards. Now, not everyone can afford to do that.
It's just about you and you.
It's just you and you. And the more attached, there's a famous Stanford study done at Bing Nursery School, probably not far from where you were in the dormitory. There's a little nursery school in Escondido Village. And they did this study where they looked at kids that liked to playing during their recess. It's all recess in nursery school, but they're drawing. And they took the kids that really like to draw, and they started giving them little gold stars on their drawings. And then they like the gold stars for a kid. That's an extrinsic reward. And then they stopped doing that, and the kids stopped drawing. They associated the good feeling of doing it with the external rewards. Right. We have to be very cautious about how much of our internal dopamine we attach to external rewards if we want to continue to grow and pursue and focus and work hard. If you just want to get to some place and cash in, then fine. But most people find themselves in a pretty miserable place because their dopamine was so attached to external rewards, they need more and more of that.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, try hypnosis.
When people think of hypnosis, I think they think of stage hypnosis. What's the real deal? Why is it useful? And how do people actually use it?
Yeah. So I'm really glad you asked about this. So I have a colleague, his name is David Spiegel in our Department of Psychiatry at Stanford, and he and I have a collaboration going now looking at how respiration or breathing can be used to shift the brain into different states. And I've talked to David about this, and so I'm sort of borrowing from his words here, so I want to be fair that these are from those conversations. So hypnosis inevitably involves relaxing the nervous system, taking the nervous system into states that are more like sleep. Now, what I mean by that is in high alert states, where you're talking and planning and in action and stress in particular, the brain is very linear. It's saying, okay, if this, then this, if then that. This is why we tend to be forward thinking when we're stressed. We tend to be not in our immediate experience, but really kind of forward thinking. So clinical hypnosis involves going into a state of deeper relaxation so that our analysis of space and time, meaning the way that the brain is perceiving events, is slightly dismantled so that it's a little bit dreamlike. And then the hypnotist, and this could be by listening to a script or listening to a hypnotherapist, starts to narrow our context, take our thoughts, if you will, down a particular path. And that path could be one of stress reduction or smoking cessation. Hypnosis incidentally is very good for treatment of smoking cessation or for feelings of well-being or confronting traumas. So what it is it's really opening up the window for neural plasticity, which is, of course, the brain's ability to change in response to experience. To trigger neural plasticity, you have to have focus, especially as an adult. You need acetylcholine released, but high levels of attention, acetylcholine and norepinephrine together. Norepinephrine to create that sense of urgency, and acetylcholine to bring that spotlight of focus in really, really tight. That triggers plasticity. But it marks certain synapses in the brain for change. But the actual changes in the synapses, the rewiring, okay, that happens during states of sleep and deep rest. So this is why when you're trying to learn a motor skill, you go and your tennis serve, it's not happening. You take a break, you come back and you nail it. You're like, wait, what happened? Well, you needed time to set those circuits in motion and allow them to do the rewiring, the sort of adaptation. Hypnosis seems to capture both the high attentional state and the deep relaxation at the same time. It's this very unusual state of mind where you're neither asleep nor awake and in tight focus or narrow focus. And it's very clear that it leads to these rapid changes in behavior because you're rewiring the brain. And the reason you're able to rewire the brain so quickly is because you're getting the trigger event, the focus, and you're also getting the relaxation event simultaneously. And so it's much faster than separating out the learning trigger from the actual rewiring of the brain.
Rule number 6, practice releasing dopamine.
Dopamine is not just about reward. It's one of the biggest misconceptions. Dopamine is about motivation and drive. It's like a jet that propels you along a path.
So how do we get more dopamine?
You practice subjectively releasing dopamine in your mind.
Like how?
Okay, so that's a great question. First of all, there are ways you can get more dopamine release through thoughts or through drugs or through supplements. I want to be really clear. There is a drug, there are 2 drugs actually, that will cause massive release of dopamine. They're called cocaine and methamphetamine. The problem
That's what
is,
gets us addicted because it feels so good.
The problem is cocaine and methamphetamine stimulate so much dopamine release that the drug becomes the only source. It becomes the goal
of
and
joy.
the path. It becomes the path and the destination. And you look at people's lives when they do a lot of cocaine and methamphetamine, and that baseline on their life goes down. Dopamine is this incredibly powerful molecule that allows us to buffer the effort process. It allows us to be in effort longer, and it allows us to actually eventually enjoy the process of effort.
And not think about the reward, but just say, oh, I'm enjoying the process.
Right. Well, you just described the first step. The first step in learning to attach dopamine to the effort process, which is the key operation in order to succeed, is to be very careful about how much you focus on the end goal. Keeping the goal in mind is important for like a proper orientation. You have to know the ultimate destination. But if at any point we were to evaluate our progress relative to that end goal, or if we don't know what the end goal is, there's a huge gap there, and it can feel overwhelming. The key to this is, if we want to be very concrete, we should probably focus on actions. And I'll use fitness as an example because it translates to everybody, whereas people's circumstances differ. Let's say somebody really wants to take on a fitness routine. They hate running, or they want to lose weight in a healthy way, this kind of thing. So we've all heard the example, well, you put your shoes by the door on day 1. Day 2, you put them on. Day 3, you go out the door. Day 4, you walk around the block, and then, and then eventually like they're running marathons. Okay, great. But to sustain that behavior, or even to make the behavior pleasurable and to give you energy, the key is to subjectively reward those steps. So it's not going to be, let's say I go out and I run a mile, and my goal is to run 10 miles in a few weeks. The key is, as you're in the strain of that mile, the hard part, you want to tell yourself, this is the good part. This is the part that gives me energy. And I'll be very surprised if people don't actually feel like they could continue further. So it's a journey of 1,000 miles starts with is made up of, single steps. But the key is to reward the harder steps, not the easier ones, and not the ones where you get the thing that you want. There's a process I'm going through right now where I'm trying to write a book, and it's hard. And I was told that the harder it is, the better I'm probably doing it. And I was like, great. And my editor's ready to kill me, and because I'm slow, and I know, and I'm a very slow person. I drive people crazy. I'm like glacially slow because science is slow, and I like to get things right.
You want to rush it. Yeah.
I like to get things right, but I'm very proud of the fact that everything we've published, I can stand behind. It was the best we could do with the tools at the time, and I just know that when I look back on a writing career or a scientific career, I want to be able to say, every journal we put it in was rock solid. Everything was rock solid. We had fun doing it, the relationship. So I go slow.
Yeah.
But as a consequence, what I'm finding is There are a lot of interferences these days. I think social media is great. I teach neuroscience on social media because I think it's important to do public education.
But it's a distraction too.
But it's incredible. And it's incredible how much time and energy it can take. So what I've started doing now is I turn off my phone and I lock it in a safe. And I experience extreme anxiety.
Right?
It's so weird.
Why is that? Is it because it gives you so much dopamine that when you're not having it?
Well, this is scary because I actually think, brief anecdote, on the weekend I was driving, there's a kid that I mentor, and I picked up my phone and I was texting while I was driving. And he said to me, this is really embarrassing for me. He said, I wish you wouldn't text while you drive. And I put it down and I realized, this is crazy. I know that my life and his life is far more important, and the lives of the people around me are far more important than any text message, which means I wasn't doing it rationally. It's just pure reflex at this point. So I don't think I pick up the phone because I don't even know what I'm looking for there anymore. It's just become reflexive.
Wow.
So for me lately, the longer I can keep that phone in a safe and write on a grant or this book, what I tell myself is the agitation is good. At least I'm not doing that. And then I find that as I start to write and I get into the process, I start feeling good about it, and I'll pause and say, okay, I have control. I have ultimate control over my behavior. I can put that thing away. There might be a nuclear war out there, and I'm just doing this anyway. I have control over my thoughts, my feelings, and behavior. So I tell myself that, and then I find I have immense energy, and all I want to do is write. And I kind of tunnel into the process.
Wow.
And I think that sometimes people need to write these things out for themselves so it's really concrete. I think some people are so unskilled at subjective rewards that writing it out is really powerful.
So what would you write out for yourself as a subjective reward for this experience?
As long as I'm writing, I'm on the right path. As long as I'm not writing, I'm looking at my phone, I'm not on the right path. Because for me, the 2 or 3 things that are most important for my career are writing grants, working on this book manuscript, and writing scientific manuscripts. I mean, there are other things as well.
And anything else that you're not doing is holding you back from doing that.
That's right.
So you need to be focused, center mass forward on doing those things.
That's right. So I don't do any jumping around, power poses, things like that. I will use tools to kind of ramp up my dopamine. There are certain songs that are really embedded in my emotional thing that go back to, when I was a, wild, skateboarding punk rock teenager that will get me fired up. And I think there's real utility. That's pure dopamine.
Rule number 7, think in processes.
Hashtag growth mindset is one of the most popular hashtags in social media, but most people don't actually know what it means. And again, this is Carol Dweck's discovery, not mine. It was discovered in a group of kids that were doing math problems or other kinds of puzzles that they knew they couldn't get right, but they enjoyed doing them, and they perform exceedingly well on lots of sorts of tests of that sort, when there is the right answer, of course. And so what they do is they're wired for effort. They're wired for the puzzle, not for the solution. And when I say puzzle, I don't mean the noun puzzle. I mean the verb for being puzzled. It, for them, feels good. And so we need to think, if we're talking about the nervous system and we want to make it actionable for high performance, whether or not it's in business or sport or otherwise, we want to think in terms of processes, not events, and verbs, not nouns. So growth mindset as a verb, as an action item, reward as a verb, not just as you're going to just pat yourself on the back. Like it's what you internalize. It's a process. That's how the neural circuits that underlie reward get stronger. And the beauty of the brain is that you have this thing of neuroplasticity, which is its ability to change itself throughout the whole lifespan. And the more you practice this, the better you get at it. And it does not mean you're walking around talking delusionally about how great life is when everything is terrible. It means you might even be very stoic. You might be, hopefully you're very rational, but you have the energy to continue to push forward.
Rule number 8, attach meaning.
There's an interesting process that occurs when people start to realize that rewards are all internal. And what they start to do is they start linking this duration path outcome thing to their internal rewards. And so to put this simply, one of the most powerful things that any person can do is to learn to control this idea of duration, path, and outcome and attach an internal sense of reward, just that you're doing well. To reward yourself mentally, just say, I'm doing well, I'm actually on the right path. To do that inside of the demands that come from the external world, the more often that we can self-reward some aspect of the process, provided it's in the right direction of what we're trying to achieve, the more energy we're going to have for that, the more focus we're going to have for that. And remember, the reason I say energy, I don't throw that around loosely, is that limiting amount of noradrenaline is constantly being kept at bay. You're literally buffering the quit response. And so when people start realizing that if they set the goals inside of the larger goal and self-reward each one of those, they essentially have an infinite amount of energy to pursue those goals. They have an infinite amount of focus to pursue those goals. You see this most in the special operations community and people that are selected essentially for this process. So one of the things that's been intriguing to me, I have some friends from the SEAL teams, and I don't begin to really understand the real work that they do deployed because I've never done that kind of work. But I've always been intrigued by the selection process, the so-called BUDS process, right? Because carrying logs and getting in cold water and all that, that's not really how the work is. That's really not what the work is about. So the selection process is interesting because everyone shows up fit, motivated, and convinced that they're not going to quit. I mean, I think like there might be a couple people that just show up, but everybody is absolutely convinced. And then a very small subset of them make it through. And I'd be willing to bet that the ones that make it through, of course, they're gritty and resilient, but they all are essentially, right? So that's necessary but not sufficient, obviously. Otherwise, everyone would make it through. The people that make it through somehow are able to tap into a process. Maybe it's a reward process. Maybe it's through self-punishment. Maybe it's through self-reward in the positive sense. But they're able to control something inside an environment that is not controlled by them. It's controlled by the instructors. And I've always been struck by the fact that in order to get through, you just have to not quit. Remember, people aren't being deselected. They're not saying, get out of here, you're not good enough. People are deciding that for themselves. Right. And so it's interesting because it brings about a real world experiment of people who are quitting. And I believe they're quitting because they can't manage these neurotransmitters. And when I say manage, I think that the people that get through, knowing some of these people quite well, had an internal process by which they could reward themselves for doing something that might have just looked trivial to everybody else, but it gave them more gas, more energy. Right? And what's interesting is the process, the kind of unconscious genius of the BUDS process is that they've picked two sensory events that are across the board challenging for everybody. One is cold water, which is great because most of the time it can't kill you, right? It's not like heat, which can kill you. It's cold water and sleep deprivation. And so the ability to do these, like what I'm calling DPOs, this duration, path, and outcome steps and procedures, is great on when you're rested. When you have well fed, well slept, you can do anything. You can be in any hard conversation. You can work through anything. So what they do is they start taking the autonomic nervous system, which is these deep reserves of the nervous system, that when our autonomic nervous system is off, it starts making us pay more attention to how we feel than the demands of the world around us. Remember that basic challenge in the nervous system. And so sleep deprivation is the best way that you can pull somebody down from their ability to analyze duration, path, and outcome and reward themselves. Sleep deprivation is the way in which you essentially pull apart the nervous system and the way that it wants to function, because it's very easy, again, rested, to do all this. But so what they do is they're sleep deprived people, they put them in cold water. They're trying to get them more in touch with the way that they feel inside than what they need to do in response to the external demands. Right. And everyone I know that's made it through that process did it slightly differently, but I'll tell you how they didn't do it. They didn't do it through sheer grit and determination. They did it through attaching a sense of meaning. They did it by slicing the day, or slicing the day into a series of meals that they just needed to get to, and then rewarding themselves for getting to that next milestone. So they don't know, I mean, most of them, probably had very low concept of dopamine and norepinephrine, but that's the process. That's also the process, I think, that allows someone to finish an ultra. I've never run an ultra, but I think that process of self-reward is grit and resilience in a kind of neurochemical definition. Yeah. And I think it's a thing that anybody can tap into. And I think it's so key, because I think people think that it's just so key that people understand, that these circuits are not unique to people who run ultras or people that make it through, stringent filter, special operations command.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that
It is
anyone could
interesting.
do.
Yeah.
Rule number 9, learn breathing patterns.
I'm really glad you mentioned the diaphragm. Diaphragm, of course, being this muscle inside of all of us, at least all mammals, that works all the time to move our lungs, because all the cells in our body need oxygen. Of course, we got to get rid of carbon dioxide. It does that, but it's done reflexively, but we can also take voluntary control over it. I want to just mention about the diaphragm, why it's so important for these state changes, is that a lot of people talk about the vagus nerve and all this stuff. The vagus and these connections between the brain and this vagus nerve or the gut, it's what gets activated when you're really full and you eat a big meal and you feel relaxed. Those are great, but it's very slow. The diaphragm is skeletal muscle, just like your bicep, just like your tricep, just like your quadricep. It is the only internal organ, except maybe a couple muscles in your throat, that are actually skeletal muscle, meaning it was designed to be voluntarily moved. And the diaphragm isn't just designed to move your lungs, it also sends a signal through the so-called phrenic nerve back to the brain to inform your brain about the status of your body. So when you breathe fast deliberately, the reason you feel kind of an elevated sense of alertness is because, yeah, there are chemicals secreted, but mostly because the phrenic nerve is firing off. It's telling you, hey, the body's moving. We're really running now, even though you're stationary in a chair if you're doing breathing. Or if you're breathing very slowly and rhythmically, right? Box type breathing or, slow breathing. Your diaphragm is telling your brain, hey, we're calm, we're good. And you calm down very quickly on the order of seconds. And so once you start tapping into this, you start realizing, okay, movement of the body was designed to inform the brain of where to be, not just the brain telling the body. And how does the body communicate with the brain? Through the phrenic nerve from the diaphragm. So my lab is really pursuing 2 questions, and this is still being worked out. So I just want to highlight that it's still in progress. But certain patterns of breathing will calm you very much like entering a hypnotic state. And so you have a subset of neurons in your brainstem that are responsible for sighing. You have a subset of neurons in your brainstem responsible for coughing, subset of neurons responsible for laughter, and a subset of neurons in your brainstem for sighing. This was a paper published in Nature. This is a real thing. These neurons are every so often, and your dog does this too, you inhale twice and then you exhale long. Now that double inhale, best done through the nose on the inhales and then long exhale through the mouth, activates these sigh neurons that trigger the so-called calming reflex, the parasympathetic arm of the nervous system. So we have a hardwired mechanism, a set of neurons, connection to the diaphragm, and back again from the diaphragm to the brain that was designed to activate calm. And when people ask me, how should I breathe to calm myself down? I always say double inhale through the nose followed by exhales. 2 or 3 of those will reset your autonomic nervous system faster than any other mechanism we're aware of, because it's really capitalizing on a set of neural circuits. Now, once you're calm, you say, well, how do I get into plasticity states? There you want to go the other direction. That's going to be inhaling a lot more than you exhale. You're going to be driving in more oxygen than you are breathing out, generally carbon dioxide. And that will lead to states that are kind of more elevated. This is typical of things like Tumo breathing, Wim Hof breathing, Kundalini breathing. And when people enter those states, their whole world changes because it shuts off the frontal cortex. This is why sometimes people pass out or they feel like they want to get up and move. You get some odd behavior when you're doing this kind of thing. So the key is, if you want to access states of heightened plasticity, let's say you want to learn faster, or you want to be more, you want to bring more out of some physical training that you're doing. The key is to apply those principles. First, you need to focus. You need to bring yourself to that heightened state of alertness. You can breathe to do that. So this would be super oxygenated breathing. Then you want to drop into a state of calm. And you do that by a couple, maybe 2 or 3 rounds of inhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, inhale, exhale. And then now your brain is in a state, we believe, this is still again being worked out in labs like mine and David's, that then you're in a state for heightened learning, because you're in a state where neurochemicals like acetylcholine are going to be at levels that are higher than they typically would be. Things like noradrenaline, slightly higher than they typically would be, but not in a discombobulated way, in a very regulated way. And the cool thing is you're regulating them. So you could argue, earlier we were talking about subjective emotions and thoughts and all these things, but one thing that's absolutely concrete is breathing. I always think of physical exercise, movement, writing, whatever, singing, dancing, talking. Those are physical actions in the universe. Then you have thoughts, and somewhere in between those is controlling your respiration. Once you can control everything that's within the confines of your skull and skin, once you can really control that relationship, that brain-body relationship, you start to realize that relationship is a lot like any other relationship to forward action. It's just all happening within the confines of my body. So it's heightened states of focus followed by states of relaxation that are going to prime your nervous system for learning and plasticity, just like hypnosis.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is be deliberate.
If I finish a chapter, I will stop for a moment and I'll just kind of smile and laugh at myself. I'm big on like self-reflection with humor and just think this is crazy. You know, my brain is under my control. There would be people out there that say there's no free will, but I do not believe that. I put my hands in a lot of brains. You stimulate certain brain areas, people do things. You stimulate other brain areas, people think things. Ultimately, unless you have electrodes in your head and someone's stimulating them, we are in control of our thoughts and behaviors. Wow. We can't control all of them, but my goal is to be as, you know, deliberate and non-reflexive as possible in life. That's my goal from when I wake up in the morning until I go to sleep.
How do we get to that place?
Little by little and by rewarding each thing. If you get up and I'll use the make the bed example, make the bed, you're not back on your heels, you make a cup of coffee, you sit down, you script out something in a journal, you exercise, maybe you call a relative that you think you need to hear from you or that you'd like to talk to. You do something in a deliberate way, just being deliberate and learning to push away the things that are trying to make you reflexive is so important.
There's a classic experiment in behavioral biology called the tube test, where you take two mice, you put them in a tube, and they try and push each other out. They fight for that tube.
Good morning, guys. Gary Vaynerchuk reminds us as we close off with him that there are no overnight successes. There is no overnight success. When we go on our path to becoming our greater, better selves, we are going to want to see results right away. But it's just not the way it works. Nature, the universe doesn't work that way. You can become successful and achieve anything you want, but it takes time. And it's not an overnight success. We have to put that thought in our heads. We have to realize that we have to enjoy the process of becoming our greater selves. So Gary Vaynerchuk reminds us of this all the time. And you look at his story, if you look him up, it's taken him, I don't know, maybe 20 years of just pure, relentless, hard work at his business and becoming and developing the mindset he has. So let's remember from him as we go on our path. Have a great day, everyone.
You'll get through that 6-year period of flatlining, right? Like there's no other way to get through that, right? If you're half-assing something, if you're doing something that's like kind of okay, but your heart's not really in it, you'll quit, you'll give up, right? Like you gotta do, the only way to get through that period is if you're fully devoted and you just keep taking swings. That's the way I think of it, is like every time I'm on an airplane making music, or like there's some other thing happening, or I'm crammed up in my studio, whatever, every time I'm taking a swing, it's another swing. And after every swing, I learn a little bit more, and I learn a little bit more, and then I put out the next video, and then I put out the next video.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Jack Conte, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, make it raw, not perfect.
Make it raw, not perfect. This was a really important lesson for me. Early on, I spent 6 months working on an album. It was 4 tracks. 6 months, I worked on 4 tracks. I polished and polished and polished and perfected and just did so much work on this record. I must have spent thousands and thousands of hours working on this record. This is like over a decade ago. And like nothing happened from that. Nobody cared about it. Like nobody cared. I remember it getting literally like 3 plays a day on MySpace. Then Pomplamoose uploaded a video in 24 hours once. Lady Gaga came out with a song called Telephone, and Natalie and I decided, okay, let's cover Telephone.
Stop calling, I don't wanna think anymore. I left my head and my heart.
And it was not perfect. It was raw, and it was just whatever we could do in 24 hours. That video now has 10 million views. And I keep learning that lesson over and over again. And I contrast that experience with like polishing this record for 6 months. It's still hard for me to like come to terms with that. The polish doesn't necessarily make it better. And in fact, a lot of times polish makes things worse. There's an element of that about like rock and roll. There's something about rock and roll and the rawness of it and the realness of it. Hearing somebody's voice crack and hearing somebody scream and hearing somebody be human, that just really attracts other human beings. Scary Pockets the other day, we recorded a track. We do live takes, like 6 people in a room pre-pandemic, recording funk music together. If you flub a note, it's in the recording. And in the middle, the singer forgot the lyric.
Try to fix you.
And instead of cutting, we just kept going. And we liked the take, so we put it out. We put out the take, and the singer laughed, and guess what all the YouTube comments were? Oh my God, that laugh was the most incredible things. It's so great to see real people making real music together. All the comments were about this one moment of rawness, this one moment of vulnerability.
Rule number 3, just make great stuff.
I thought CEOs knew how to do business and stuff, but after spending 3 years in Silicon Valley, I'm realizing that CEOs are actually just people who try really hard and like to solve problems and like to make great stuff. And in fact, it turns out that running a tech company is almost exactly the same thing as being a creator. Creators care endlessly about their fans. Tech companies care endlessly about their users. But if you know how to care endlessly, then it feels like the same thing. Creators like to make people's lives better with art. Tech companies like to make people's lives better with products. But it turns out if you like to just make great stuff, then making people's lives better with art and making people's lives better with products really feels like the same thing. The point is to just focus on making great stuff, because we're inundated in this world with monsters. Monsters that will try to steal your focus away from making great stuff. Monsters like social media strategy. Monsters like, well, that's not how professionals do it. Monsters like, you can increase your edge rank on Facebook by posting between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. when most of your fans are blah, 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 blah. All of these monsters will keep distracting you from making great stuff when really that's the secret. It's all you need to do. You don't have to know where you're going. You might make a video about a cat who likes to go surfing, and then the company that makes the surfboard might see it and call you and fly you out to Jamaica to shoot a documentary on a rare species of fish. And then while filming, you discover a microorganism and win a Nobel Prize and devote the rest of your life to the popularization of science through nonfiction writing and speaking tours. And while that might seem a little unlikely, it's not as unlikely as this guy running a tech company.
Rule number 4, adjust your packaging.
I say adjust your packaging, not your soul. 3 years after ruining my music at the Coho, Pomplamoose made a much smaller adjustment to our packaging that made all the difference. Today, Pomplamoose has about 150 million views on YouTube, but when we started publishing videos in 2008, we would get about 4,000 views on one video, 2,000 views on the next, nothing crazy. We were trying everything we could to grow. We even booked a show at a local laundromat that held 40 people called Brainwash Cafe. We weren't desperate, we were just trying everything we could, and one day I noticed something that kind of blew my mind. When you search for the Beatles on YouTube, when you search for the Beatles on YouTube, the first video that popped up was a gal named Julia Nunes. And the video was her cover of All My Loving. Keep in mind, it's 2009 at this point, so the idea of search engine optimization as it relates to music, the idea of performing cover songs on YouTube, this was not a widespread phenomenon yet. But searching for the Beatles and finding Julia Nunes felt amazing to me. That's when we decided that the next Pomplamoose video would be a song that had a massive volume of search traffic. We had a hunch that Beyonce's Single Ladies would probably get some buzz at the VMAs. So a couple days before the awards show, Natalie and I recorded a cover. At the VMAs, Kanye West stole the microphone out of Taylor Swift's hands and said, I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. Do you guys remember that? So 2 things happened. First, the internet exploded. Second, everyone went onto their computers the next day and searched for Beyonce's Single Ladies, and it generated that spike in search traffic for that term. That's also precisely when Pomplamoose uploaded our cover, and in one night we got 500,000 hits on the video. A week later, when we showed up to play our show at the local laundromat, there were 200 people inside and 200 people outside waiting to see the show. But the truth is, nothing had changed. We were playing the same songs with the same singer, the same harmony, the same rhythms, the same voice leading, the same production, the same mixing, the same mastering, the same soul. We had made a slight adjustment in song choice. That's it, song choice. It had made all the difference. It felt incredible to me, like we had taken our music and put it in a blue box instead of a freaking red one, and it changed everything by just adjusting our packaging. And we didn't even have to take our musical soul and stomp all over it. We had limited the adjustment to the packaging around our music instead of the music itself.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, learn storytelling.
Learn about storytelling. It's an art and it's a craft. There are techniques, there are tips, tricks. You can read books about storytelling. There's a wonderful book called Story by Robert McKee. There's another wonderful book called On Directing Film by David Mamet. And there's a great book by Keith Johnstone called Impro. These are all books about how to tell a story. If you can figure out how to build a narrative in your work, stories really catch people's attention. And humans love stories. I don't know why, but it's freaking true.
Rule number 6, work to publish.
Publishing is deciding to stop when you want to keep working, and it's super painful. And some people can't do it, and some people can. People like Freddie W. and Ella Fitzgerald and Zach Wienersmith and Rob Has a Podcast and Woody Allen and Hank Green and Peter Hollins and J.K. Rowling. So how do they finish so many things? They don't, but they publish them anyway. Publishing, though, is more than just a single decisive moment. It's more than just the art of identifying the point at which additional work yields diminishing marginal returns. For me now, publishing starts the instant I start recording a new song. Publishing, I found, works best if you think of it as a style of working. It's an attitude that persists throughout the entire creative process, from the moment you begin work to the moment you give it up to the world. Working to publish is about getting done the whole time. Your whole mentality shifts when you're working to publish. You focus on the stuff that matters and you ignore the stuff that doesn't. Even the fun stuff, the stuff that calls out to you and begs you to enjoy 30 minutes satisfying your obsessive desire to make something perfect that only you will notice. You write the next scene, you record the next instrument, you build the next set, you shoot the next take, you color the next frame, you design the next synth. Working to publish, it's selfless. It's outward focused. It's about results and giving back and contributing to the world. Working for pleasure, on the other hand, is how I used to spend most of my time working. It's inward focused. It's slow and enjoyable, but ultimately it's about giving to oneself. It's rooted in the ego. It's fixing details that you and only you care about. It's a luxurious self-indulgence. It's calm and it's a great way to unwind and relax, and it's freaking fun as heck, and there's a time and a place for working to publish, but like any luxury, I try my best to use it sparingly. I feel like a bit of a hypocrite here because working to publish is hard, and for me, it's more of a North Star than it is like a habit. It's a framework that I aspire to, not something that I'm great at or figured out.
Rule number 7, stay inspired and motivated.
I love metrics. I track them all the time. I run a freaking tech company. But if I lose sight of the why behind those metrics, creation and life itself can start to feel meaningless. But it isn't. I've noticed that at Patreon, if we don't celebrate and talk about our mission of getting creators paid all the time, our team starts to feel restless. The Patreon team, like a lot of teams in tech, use metrics and outcomes to set goals, which need to be clear and actionable to have any semblance of accountability in a 250-person organization. We use metrics like revenue and margin and adoption rates for new products, but metrics and outcomes are just a tool to help us collaborate effectively as a team. Patreon's mission is to fund the creative class. And if we don't pound the pavement and repeat and reiterate that mission ad nauseum, then we start to drift.
Rule number 8, visualize the future.
Visualize your future. Dream up the perfect year. Imagine it, dream it, visualize it. Like if you fast forward a year and you're looking back and you're just feeling so energized and fired up, why? Tell me about your year. Don't think too hard. Just write. Organize your thoughts later. What happened? What didn't happen? How many views, how many listens, how many fans did you get? What did you create? How did you collaborate with anyone? Did you collaborate with anyone? Who? What makes you feel proud of your work this year? What's your team like? How much money did you pay out to your team? How much money did you make as a creator? How much did you reinvest in your business? These are the kinds of questions I ask myself. And I'll just offer one thing about money here. I found that creators have a tendency to not want to talk about money, which I totally understand. I had that too as a creator. But as a creator, you're the CEO of your own business. And not thinking about money and not thinking about how much money you're going to make and how much you're going to spend, it will hurt you more than it will help you. Pomplamoose, we barely have net income. Like, I'm really proud that it's a profitable business and we manage it as a profitable business, but we're not amassing wealth. Like, that's not why we make music videos. Like, we treat money as a tool to create art.
Rule number 9, don't quit.
One piece of advice for creative people early on in their careers. It's the advice I give every time people ask me for advice, and it's never changed. It's been the same, it's been true for me. It's the advice I've taken for myself, and I think it's actually the same whether you're an artist or an entrepreneur or whatever it is. It's very simple. Don't quit. Don't quit. Just keep going. Keep trying new things. It doesn't mean keep trying the same thing over and over again. You can get yourself into a big black hole by doing that. But try more things. If what you're doing isn't working, adjust. Try again. I've played as a musician. I went on 4 tours in 2007. 4 tours and sold no tickets. Played to bars, and in one of the bars I played, there was nobody there, and I mean 0 people. The number 0 were there, and the bartender left halfway through my set, and the room was empty. And I was playing this 500-person room on stage by myself, and it's very easy to walk away from something like that and be like, "F this, I hate music, I'm done, this sucks." And I think most people quit at that point. Most people have an experience like that and they're like, I'm not getting resonance, I'm beating my head against the wall, I'm out. And most people don't know. They never know that they were 2 months away, 3 years away, 5 years away from making that thing that resonates with so many people. And instead of just getting through that gap, they quit. And my advice to creative people or entrepreneurs or whoever it is just don't quit. That's all you have to do. All you have to do is not quit, and you'll get through that gap.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
Nothing works. I'm going to talk about all the things that don't work. Since I was a kid, pretty much everything I've ever done has been a complete trash fire of a failure. And actually, that's not even true because most trash fires are like at least spectacular. My failures were not. They were very ignorable and small and irrelevant. Like, I have a box of thousands of CDs in my garage.
I have probably 12 boxes of like 200 CDs each. It's like a reminder of all the albums that I made that I didn't sell.
I tried to invent camera gear that literally just died and went absolutely nowhere. I've mixed whole albums and then not released them because I was 2 years in and just so done with the project at that point and just never released it. I've basically had miss after miss after miss after miss in my life, freckled on occasion with like a spark of something that feels really good and awesome, followed by more misses over and over again. And this is really the truth. This is like the norm, and it's not even the norm, I think, for being an artist. It's the norm for being a human freaking being. And yet when we go onto YouTube, we go to the movies, we hear stories of this like one instant, this snowflake of a moment where like everything clicks and feels awesome, and that. So
I'd prefer to hear a talk instead about that stuff, because this is the grind, right? This is like the real truth of being a person and being an artist. Those are the moments where I've grown and I've learned and I've face planted. And so these days I find myself gravitating less towards stories of like a random outlying success and more towards stories of exactly how to deal with the never-ending barrage of the human experience. It's this stuff. It's like the day after day after day, because that's most of life. And so that's what this talk is about, because at the end of the day, nothing works. Including the current style of this talk. While it is super fun to sync up a slide every 6 words with new explanatory images, this presentation is already 45 slides, and I've already been talking for 105 seconds, which is a little faster than a new slide every 3 seconds. And at that rate, I'd need 771 slides to talk for 30 minutes. And meanwhile, my calendar is a total trash fire, and my email is a total trash fire, and I don't have time to do this, so it's another bad idea. But what do you expect? Because nothing works. So, okay, actually, I am going to stop doing that now, and I'm going to... like literally.
One of the earliest investors in Patreon, Sar Gur, told me a story. He said, Jack, I saw this video that you made, where it's a making of video for your robot music video. And I saw you pour your savings account into this video. I saw you invest in something that you believed in. And I saw a person who was willing to go to the ends of the earth to accomplish their dreams and to accomplish their vision. And when I saw that, I didn't need to see the financials of Patreon. I didn't need to see the cohorts. I didn't need to see the metrics. I saw a person who would do anything to make it work. And that's why I decided to invest. When Sar told me that, it made me remember why Pamplemousse did that tour in the first place, and why we wrote the article about it, and why I made the music video that he saw, and why I started Patreon. I did those things because I do go all in on stuff. I am the kind of person who gets really excited about something and then goes for it. And I don't want to change that about myself. I like that about myself. And I realize that sometimes from the outside, that can look reckless. And yeah, sometimes it leads to flops. But sometimes it works. And to me, that makes it worth it.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag Believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video, because you are awesome. To see the top 10 we did on Mark Laurie, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I failed so many times as a kid, whether it be academically or otherwise, that I was so comfortable with failing that it was not even a concept. You know, it just meant that, combined with just being chill.